I'm saying bye to all the lies and all the times you cried, saying that I wasn't right, yet I was right by your side. You manipulator, playing games, your friends commentators, and I don't know what you say about our private conversations, but it's got them hating thanks to all the rumors you be claiming. It's cool, I'm done with you, so they can throw you a celebration. You gon' hate it when you see me with somebody living better. I'm trying to tell you that me just doing me gon' have you jealous.
Hello, folks. Welcome back to the program. This is Chris live in central Pennsylvania with my guest today, none other than the Conscious Caracal, one of the coolest usernames on YouTube of all. Ernst van Zyl. Ernst now with AfriForum and doing quite a bit of work with them. He's done a documentary recently, and I hope this is the one I watched with Martin van Staden. If not, I watched the wrong movie. Hey, Ernst, how's it going?
I'm doing very well, Chris. Busy. I mean, I'm speaking to the, preaching to the choir, because you're also, I know you've also been very busy the past few months, past 2 months. It's just been an endless whirlwind of questions and debates and interviews and allegations and fiction and fact, and it's just been an absolute tornado over the last 2 months, but it's been a good last 2 months. I think at the end of the day, retrospectively looking back, a lot of positive has come out of the chaos. A lot of opportunity has come out of it. And you yourself, I see you've also been chatting to some of my good friends recently there in the United States as well. So you've also been getting your fill of your South African company there on the on the US side.
Well, there's an endless parade of representatives from different organizations showing up here in the States, and it hasn't ended. So it's I might have to come to South Africa to escape it. Yeah, no, there's been a lot of people coming over from different political parties and civic organizations, and it's not over. More are scheduled to come over here, so we'll see how it goes. But one thing I guess we can say, Ernst, this for certain, is that I would argue, in some respects, maybe this is generalization, but for the first time since the German Kaiser recognized the Afrikaner community during the Anglo-Boer War, the Afrikaner community has been recognized by a major political leader around the world, and the term Afrikaner and Afrikaners is foremost and front and center for many people around the world right now. Something that hasn't happened in a century, probably.
Yes, as far as we can see, I mean, at least the past 50 years, but I think longer. You're absolutely correct. There hasn't been this explicit of an acknowledgement of the Afrikaner community here at the southern tip of Africa from a major global power. And in a positive sense as well, that's also very significant. It is a sympathetic voice, not a condemning voice or a slandering voice, but rather, I see you, I see what is happening. That type of acknowledgement, I don't think people realize the value and the power of just that acknowledgement alone at this moment, but I think in the future it's going to become a lot more clear just how valuable and unprecedented that was in the whole episode of the past 2 months. But I think also something that stood out to me was the fact that in regards to AfriForum and the solidarity movement, as soon as Afrikaners are mentioned, every single person, black, white, young, old, Afrikaner, non-Afrikaner, all immediately ask the question, what does AfriForum and the solidarity movement have to do with this? I mean, that
well, and there's always
there's
always a close follow-up to that too. And what about Orania? That always gets thrown in there afterwards.
Absolutely, yeah. So that's a good thing. I'm very glad that AfriForum and the Solidarity Movement, our brand has grown to that point where we are one of the first organizations that people think of when Afrikaners are mentioned on the global stage. But that's also something that is the fruits of many, many years of building up a network of international friends and allies and contacts. You are one of those friends that we've met along the way, because at the end of the day, in a globalized world, no man and no organization can be an island. You need friends and allies and people out there that will be able to tell your story, that will be able to give you a platform. In the case that, as we saw the past 2 months, where you are made public enemy number one in the media, you're going to need platforms where you can then get the truth out, even if you're going up against a very strong opponent in the ANC's propaganda machine. And I think you hear some of those beautiful Haridas there in the background interrupting my train of thought there. But yeah, at the end of the day, we are up against a very strong propaganda machine. But luckily, alternative media have established themselves the past few years to have a very powerful counterweight to that ANC propaganda machine.
Well, and to that point, you talk about alternative media. People establish themselves. Some of us have been out there doing this for some time, like yourself, myself, and at times difficult to gain traction. But with people hungry for the truth now, because of the endless propaganda media blitz that's taking place by government officials, by legacy media in South Africa, and not just there, but also abroad, it is finally interesting to see that legacy media are actually not always getting the story correct, but I have to tell you this, Aaron. So I see an awful lot of stories get edited and changed after I report the factual information about things. Like a News 24 story yesterday said that Brent Bozell, and this is a minor thing, but just to give an example, Brent Bozell had been nominated by Congress to be the ambassador to South Africa. That is incorrect. Congress doesn't nominate people for those positions. The president nominates them, just like in South Africa. So I mentioned that on my broadcast, and 3 hours later, I noticed the News 24 story correctly had this story up there that the president nominated him for the Senate to confirm. Anyway, my point is that the media are paying attention to the alternative media, and sometimes it seems like alternative media are driving the news narrative when it gets corrected in South Africa. But back to the point about the Afrikaners being recognized. Yeah, Afrikaners have been recognized for decades, but seldom in a positive light because of international reporting, because of apartheid. And so Afrikaners as an ethnic group got blamed for apartheid, although they bear some burden for that. But the point is that in a positive light, a recognition of an ethnic community that is disparaged, dismissed, and ignored for so long, it is, I think, very refreshing to see a major international figure, in fact, the leader of the strongest country in the world, the global leader, recognize the Afrikaners as a people, and I recognize that they're under pressure. Like you said, I think that a lot of Afrikaners were just shocked that that would happen, and I think it's a good development. Whatever comes next, it's a good development. You know, this refugee thing, yes or no, really not germane. The issue is that Afrikaners have been recognized and their plight is noticed.
And there's a massive spotlight being shone on the South African government. I just constantly get reminded of the social experiment that I saw being done a few years ago, where they put a bowl of money in the streets and they filled it with money, or the bowl full of money, and they put a sign there saying, "Take as much as you want." And within an hour, all the money was gone. And then the next day, they put the same bowl there full of money, also a sign that says, "Take as much as you want," but they took on top of it, they put like a massive poster against the wall of two big eyes watching that bowl of money. And then people, at the end of the day, the bowl of money was still full of money. Nobody dared to take $1 out of the bowl. And I mean, that human psychology at play there, I think, will be at play in South Africa now that Donald Trump has sent that message, that warning of, "I'm watching you." Just that simple idea of there is now an eagle eye on your country and what you guys are doing there, I think will have an incredibly positive effect, specifically on an ANC that has become very arrogant and thought that they can just get away with anything that they want, push any extremist policy they want, threaten whoever they want without any consequence.
Well, my new merchandise line will be Ek Wachiao.
With
be a big figure
picture of
pointing.
Trump pointing.
Exactly. Ek Wachiao. In fact, that's my next T-shirt. Oh my goodness! But okay, so hey, let's talk about your latest documentary. Of course, I was there for it was, I believe, your first ever documentary. Am I correct? When I went to the AfriForum Theater, and that was brilliant on self-besteur. I always pronounce it wrong, but at least I got the self correct this time. I didn't default to the German selbst, but for self-sufficiency, self-reliance, which was a brilliant documentary. And now you released another one with, I believe, Martin van Staden as a guest on that program with you.
So this time around, the previous documentaries that AfriForum have produced have been much larger projects. I think of Ernst van Zyl's Disrupted Land, Tainted Heroes by Ernst van Zyl. Then also my last documentary that you mentioned, the Afrikaans one, Self-Bestuur, that was also a pretty large project, took many months to put together, a lot of different guests that we had to incorporate. This time around, it was a bit more of a time crunch and a much smaller team. So it was pretty much the majority of the work was a two-man team. It was me and one editor from AfriForum TV, Leandri de Klerk, and we put this documentary together in about 2 weeks. A lot of other people within AfriForum TV also helped, of course, but overall it was us two that did the majority of the work. And then at the end of the day, the end product I'm very happy with, because we wanted to specifically within the context answer that question of, is Trump right about about South Africa? Because if you look at the past 2 months, there's been so many debates, panel discussions, interviews, analysis, everything, every type of comment format that you can imagine. But most of them got sidetracked to all these sensationalist topics like, is AfriForum committing treason? Is Donald Trump a racist? Is the ANC still the perfect, most like unquestionable leader of uncriticizable beacon of hope in South Africa? Although these like side sensational topics, and not a lot of people were really tackling the actual meat of the question. Is Donald Trump actually right about South Africa? A lot of people were just screaming misinformation, lies, propaganda, without really giving really any examples or proof of said misinformation or disinformation or whatever magic word you want to use. So then we at AfriForum just decided, well, if nobody wants to touch this nuclear, like uranium like radioactive question, let us just do it. And we have all the tools to do it, because a lot of people ask, how did you get all this research done and all these examples and all of these sources in such a short period of time? Because we produced the documentary in less than 2 weeks. I just tell those people, well, we had them lying around, because when you're a AfriForum representative and you go into interviews, you better be absolutely perfectly prepared. Your arguments need to be completely bulletproof, watertight. So we've got fact sheets and on almost any topic imaginable that's relevant to AfriForum, and we have many reports that we've also produced over the years on these topics. So I only had to use that database of information and compress it into a documentary. So it made it a lot more easy. And that was what we wanted to achieve, was to create a documentary where we have produced all these very detailed reports over the years, but let's change gears a little bit. For that person out there that's genuinely curious about these topics, but just doesn't have the time to read a 50-page report, let's take all that without changing any of the information. Let's just change the vehicle with which we communicate it, and let's see if that gets a very good response. And it did have a very good response. We're at about 90,000 views at this point, very quickly approaching 100,000.
Well, those Hadidas are definitely making some noise in the background. But I will say this, Ernst, not everybody falls for the nonsense. I mean, I've been pointing out that this is all distractionary. Trump has imposed sanctions. There are no sanctions on South Africa. That's ludicrous. Trump has struck out and been aggressive against South Africa. That's ludicrous. Trump suspended foreign aid across the entire planet. South Africa decided to cry, oh, woe is me, you're attacking me, which wasn't the case. And as far as the refugee program, who we let in our country as a refugee is up to us. We take in 30 to 150,000 people every year from all over the world, from Chad, from Sudan, from South Sudan, from Somalia, from Myanmar. It's up to us. We pay for that. We resettle those folks here. And if the president designates a group of people like the Uyghurs or the Rohingya or Afrikaners as being persecuted and gives them in-country status, that's his prerogative. Sad part is it's going to be devastating for South Africa if it does happen. But the bottom line is that not all of us fell for that nonsense, and some of us have pushed it. Now, I guess perhaps my frequent sarcasm with many of my prepared videos, I frequently say, I show a clip of Noto Boloye saying the horrible things he says, or I show a clip of, the EFF singing Kill the Boer, and I'm like, oh, so Donald Trump got it wrong. He was mistaken. It's perfectly safe for folks to be in South Africa. No one's under threat. So maybe my sarcasm didn't come through for some people, but I think it has come through for most people to realize that there's a real problem here, and Trump was not wrong. And so I think that your documentary fell into the right space at the right time, and hopefully a lot more people will see it.
And in this documentary, as I said, it's a bit smaller scale than some of the previous ones. So I talked to two experts specifically here. The one expert is Martin van Staden. He is from the Free Market Foundation. And why I chose Martin van Staden for this documentary is one of the reasons is the fact that over the recently, one of the numbers that people have been referencing the most is that 140 plus race laws in South Africa. But how do we know that South Africa has more than 140 or 142 race laws? Because of the work of Martin van Staden at the Free Market Foundation. He actually did the work. He went and meticulously documented all the different race laws in South Africa, every piece of legislation that makes race legally relevant. And he created created, he's a researcher behind the Race Laws Index that people can go check out now for themselves. That's how we know today how many race laws there are in South Africa. If Martin didn't do that work, we would still be having just guesswork, one person claiming this, another person claiming this. Martin did the hard work, and now we have a clear picture. So I had to talk to him if I want to have an expert on about race laws in South Africa, and that's one of the things that Donald Trump alludes to very explicitly, is when he says that how people are being targeted in South Africa by legislation. Of course, that's definitely, he's talking about, I think, among other things, racially discriminatory legislation. And then the other guest that I had was Theo de Jager. Now, Chris, you will also be very much aware of this. You covered this story, if I remember correctly, as well. The Theo being infamously edited out of a government document, out of a picture. There was a picture of him taken at the German embassy with a lot of other representatives from the South African government. And then when that photograph was published, he was just conveniently edited out, causing major controversy. I mean, I grew up under this insane government, and even I was taken aback by. I've never seen anything like that. It's really Stalin style.
No. Yeah, I have seen that. I have seen it in the Soviet Union repeatedly.
Right. And it just blew my mind that if you dare to criticize this government's agenda and mission to expropriate property without compensation, you just get disappeared. You just get like edited out of a photograph. And that's why I had to talk to Theo de Jager. Also, the man has a CV that's like a mile long. I think it's like 3 pages of just absolute stellar experience that he's had in the world of agriculture. He's the previous president of the World Farmers Association. He is the head of SAI, the South African Agriculture Initiative, that specifically is one of the largest farmers unions in South Africa, and that specifically represents the small family farmers of South Africa. So I had to talk to Theo de Jager as well. So those are the 2 guests that I interviewed, and then we also bolster those interviews with research of our own from AfriForum's side. And what we really went out of our way with to achieve with this documentary was, because we're being accused of all these things, misinformation, disinformation, whatever, we made sure that every single claim or fact that is presented in this documentary, every single claim that is made, is directly referenced by a source. So you'll see when a claim is made by someone in an interview or me doing a presentation in the documentary, there will be a source on screen that tells you where does this information come from. If you don't trust AfriForum when we make that claim, you can go check that source for yourself. And then that's what we did with this documentary as well. We had an obsessive focus on specifically having as many sources present as possible to prove every single point that we were making there. So yeah, I think that was that in the end made the documentary quite watertight and bulletproof. There has not been a successful quote-unquote fact check or debunking of it. News 24, I know, tried with like a blog post masquerading as a fact check by Peter du Toit. But I mean, when you read some of these opinion pieces from News 24, I always tell people to make it more accurate, you should just insert Dear Diary before you start reading, and then it will just makes a lot more sense what's going on there.
Well, I think what you're talking about there is those sort of op-eds are just simply, dear propagandists, today I fabricated the following story. You know, it's great that you put those sources in there to reference for people who are serious, that are curious about things. And that will change for those in your national audience who are genuine people. That will change some people's views, and they will pay attention. But a lot of these leftists simply, and so-called journalists today in media, they put links to things, and they're not even the same thing. I mean, I see these fact checks, and I click, and it just takes me a page where they cover stories. It doesn't take me to the fact that they point out. Or it takes me to something like a Wikipedia page where some leftist has put something on there, and no one's removed it yet, and it isn't factual. Or it links to their own stories where they've lied previously. Look, we've proved this. Yeah, by lying last year, now you're repeating a lie. So what my point is that those who are serious will take it seriously, but leftists, it's not going to change their mind. These people have a worldview that is bizarre, and they want to wallow in it, and they want to bring the rest of us down to their misery level. Again, the thing is, Ernst, I mean, communism works. Just nobody's applied it properly yet. Socialism works. It's not the fault of Venezuela. It's not the fault of Campuchia. It's not the fault of North Korea or the Soviet Union. They failed because they didn't take it seriously. We got to do it harder. You got to do it harder. You got to take more property. You got to take more rights away. More people in the gulag. Oh, didn't mean to mention the gulag.
Well, Ernst van Zyl has this great saying where he says, if you take a bad idea and you just apply it more radically, you just fail more radically. That's what happens. You just exacerbate the bad results that you get. And I mean, that's the story of many of these policies of the ANC. A lot of these policies are very beautiful names like Black Economic Empowerment, Redress, Employment Equity. But we should be judging these policies by their fruits. What are they achieving? What means are they employing to achieve a lot of these outcomes? I mean, when you look at, for example, a policy like Black Economic Empowerment, it's a farce to call it Black Economic Empowerment because it has nothing to do with empowering Black South Africans.
It is the Cater Enrichment Program. Yeah. That's what it is.
Yeah.
The CEP, the Cater Enrichment Program.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. And that's what our argument really shines through in this documentary as well, is the fact that when you look at the various race laws in South Africa, firstly, on a moral level, they're wrong. Just, there's a large, very strong wind coming in here. I'm just going to close this window for a moment.
That's okay. We're in different hemispheres, folks. Clarence is in the southern hemisphere, moving into the winter time, and here we are in the northern hemisphere in spring, headed towards summer. So opposite seasons between South Africa and the USA right now.
Yeah, there's a high-felt storm rolling in over Pretoria now, so I can see the trees starting to sway now and the wind blowing in here. But I welcome it. We've had a very dry summer so far, so it's good to get a lot more
dry
rain.
Summer. Where are you at? The Northern Cape? I mean, people have been getting drowned in Gauteng, man. It's raining every day.
Relatively to previous summers that I've experienced. I mean, I have a garden, so I'm taking stock about how much rain we're getting. But Chris, what I also wanted to get to was the fact that specifically the contrast that we're seeing here when I mentioned that quote unquote fact check that's been basically a hit piece that's been employed against this documentary. There's one very stark contrast between the two formats. So both the documentary and the quote unquote fact check are claiming they want to spread the truth. They want to get the facts out there. There's just one very, very key difference. The fact check is hidden behind a paywall, and AfriForum's documentary is 100% free to view for the whole world to see. That's the big difference, because the one is profit motivated and AfriForum's is motivated by the fact that we want as many people as possible to see this documentary, see the truth and the facts being presented there, and also open ourselves up to criticism and scrutiny in regards to let everyone come see what we have to say, what our stances are, what our arguments are, and have at it. Take your best shots at what we have to argue and what we have in our arsenal. And there's the other key difference that we have here is on the AfriForum side with our documentary, we don't tell people how to think. The point, our documentary, never in the documentary do we tell people, and there you have it, this is why, this is the truth, and if you view this in any other way, you're stupid or unenlightened or you're just not paying attention, go read a book or whatever. No, we are at the end of the documentary, we tell the audience, now that we have presented these facts to you, you can be the judge to answer the question, is Trump right about South Africa? Well, the fact checks and a lot of the other hit pieces that have appeared the past 2 months against AfriForum have been pieces that are written in this format of, we are here to enlighten you, the uneducated, stupid, barbaric masses. We are here to give you the truth. We are here to tell you how to think. We are going to enable you to then go out and be the smartest person at the braai or be the most enlightened person at your next party. Not, here are the facts and you can decide for them yourself and decide for yourself whether this is an accurate representation of what you see with your own eyes and hear with your own ears. No, it is, if you don't agree with this fact or with this narrative, don't believe your lying eyes, don't believe your lying ears. That's what the one side is saying. Well, AfriForum is saying, we actually give credit to the audience. We don't insult the audience's intelligence. We tell them, here are the facts that we have. You can look at them. You can go see for yourself. Even here's all the sources for all of these facts. Go, if you really are curious, you can go do a deep dive into every one of these claims, and then you decide for yourself. You answer that question for yourself, the question of the documentary.
No, it's great the way you've done that. In the comments here, Amanda Short said, "Donkey Kennis is mach." Well, yes, knowledge is power, but so is propaganda, and that's just something you have to refute. Propaganda is also very powerful, and if we didn't believe that, you just have to go back to Goebbels and go forward. And then you think knowledge is power. Look at Jen Psaki at the State Department, and then for the White House, and look at Karine Jean-Pierre, America's favorite lesbian Haitian. Yeah, and their propaganda, lying, and people buying it hook, line, and sinker. That's why people have to produce things like this. It's why people have to have solid sources. You have to have an unimpeachable CV. You have to be the best person you can, because they will come after you and they will attack you. Ernst knows this. I know this. We see this all the time. But the reality is, you're right. Those sorts of sources are talking down to the people that are watching their content, reading their print, and it's embarrassing. You know, what my guide stone has always been: you can believe what you want. You don't have to believe me. Here's the receipts. I mean, here you go. There's the frequently asked questions from the American Embassy. Here's the executive order from Donald Trump. You don't have to believe my analysis. Go read it for yourself. Here is the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1980 for the United States, for refugee program. Like you, I produce the receipts, and then I offer my analysis, because as a 30-plus year intelligence analyst, I tend to get it right most of the time, and usually predict these things before anybody realizes the problem. Anyway, point being that we have to get it right all the time. They just propagandize. And the problem is that so many people react emotionally, Ernst. They really react emotionally to things instead of being lucid, calm, cogent, and just thinking through things. I think when you read a headline, or especially on social media, when you see something, your first reaction should be like, oh, okay, all right, let me get a cup of coffee. All right, okay. Now let me reread that, and then respond to it.
I've got another very valuable rule of thumb that I've just been emphasized once again in 2025, and that is the fact that if you read any claim, whether that claim be about AfriForum said this, or Chris Wyatt claims this, can you believe this person said this, you should immediately pause and ask yourself, am I hearing this directly from the source that they're claiming is saying this, or am I hearing someone's interpretation, or through someone else's lens, someone else's paraphrasing of what this person or organization has said? I can't tell you how many times people will send me an email or call and say, how can AfriForum say X, Y, or Z, or take the stance X, Y, and Z? And then I immediately give them the receipts, as you say, well, no, this is our stance. Here it is, and you can hear it here, you can read it here. And then immediately they're like, oh, okay, no, I was mistaken. Thank you very much. Goodbye. And I always just leave them with that advice and saying, doesn't matter, not just AfriForum, this is for any organization or individual out there. When you hear a claim about that individual, are primary sources being cited, or is this someone giving you their interpretation of what someone else or an organization has been saying? I think that's a very valuable rule of thumb to combine with yours that you gave there as well.
Well, and along with that, there's one further piece, and this is something as intelligence analysts you always look at. And of course, we deal with oftentimes all kinds of sources, including human sources in the intelligence world. What is the motivation? Why is the person telling you this narrative? Why are they saying this about someone else? I found it very fascinating that recently, when AfriForum and Solidarity came to the States, everyone wanted to charge them with treason. Oh, treason. Oh. And then suddenly, about 10 days later, Rebecca Davis on the Daily Maverick wrote a story saying, well, we don't have any receipts. There's no evidence that they met with anybody. There's a picture of them at the White House. They just took a tour. You know, everybody gets that picture. You know, I mean, how do we know they even saw anybody? The only people we know they saw was Joel Pollack and some right-wing podcaster in America in a coffee shop. Really? So ask yourself the motivation. Who's the right-wing podcaster? And there's actually a link to my video. And why is that person called a right-wing podcaster?
And why didn't you mention him by name?
Yeah, exactly. Why don't you mention first name? And beyond that, why don't you mention a university professor, undergraduate, postgraduate lecturer at university, a multilingual published author, an academic, a successful military, you know, all the different titles and things that I have. But no, a right-wing podcaster, because that is a slur, and it's meant to undermine AfriForum and Solidarity and me at the same time. And then we see, you know, it goes on from there. I saw Newsroom Africa responding to something I said about this Professor Amanda Khoz at Stellenbosch. And all I said to her, I didn't question what she said about the land issue, about land. She was saying that the United States had applied sanctions. I said, excuse me, What sanctions? Show me the sanctions. There's no sanctions here. You know, it's like Cuba Gooding Jr. Show me the money. Show me. There's nothing. Anyway, so
like Trump is spreading misinformation, or AfriForum is spreading misinformation.
What misinformation?
What misinformation?
Right.
So they're just doing it. You know, they're doing it. No, they're not.
They're not. So Newsroom Africa followed that up the next week by saying, last week, a former colonel, hey, sweetheart, I'm not a former colonel. I am a colonel. That hasn't changed. I'm subject to recall, and in fact was nearly recalled to active duty last year. So get your facts straight. It sounds like a trivial point.
You get called everything except
what you are.
You are.
Exactly. A center-right, conservative, independent journalist and independent consultant. And anyway, it's important.
Next, they're just going to call you a rugby enthusiast, a radical rugby enthusiast.
Right-wing rugby enthusiast, yeah. he only likes the white countries. But wait a second, he's a Springbok fan. That doesn't quite compute. No. It's important to refute these things. Look, I didn't see all the documentary. My time is pretty compressed at the moment. But I did see the portions with Martin van Zyl. I didn't realize Theo was in there. So I have to go back and try to catch you into that. But I thought it was well done.
You're a busy man, Chris. It's not going anywhere. It's not like we're going to be taking it down. It's there. It's not going to be paywalled anytime. It's going to be free to view forever. So you can watch it when you have when they have the time.
No, I'll catch the end of it, but I'd like to see the portion with Teo Diaga because I think I don't know if I was the person that broke that story, but I was certainly one of the earliest to cover that about how he was just wiped right out of the photograph in Pio the Seed, which is the Department of Agriculture's magazine. It's pathetic. It's unbelievable. I mean, it's very Stalin-esque. I mean, to just whitewash someone from history like that as if he was never there, and it's shocking. And I have the original photos with the metadata that prove that the guy was there. You know, so it's I don't know what they're.
It's not even a very good Photoshop job.
No. I mean, the Soviets in the 1930s did a better job photoshopping those actual original prints and original negatives than these guys did today with the best software in the world. So, look, it's pretty crazy, but I mean that's just kind of how things work. So,
but I also wanted to point out something very quickly, Chris, and that's this very ridiculous argument that actually now that we think about it, AfriForum and Solidarity probably didn't meet with anyone because they're not willing to tell us who they met with.
Right.
No, all that happened was we learned a very valuable lesson in 2018. In 2018, AfriForum was also in the United States, and then we published who we met with. And then the South African media launched into an aggressive, vicious attack on those people, smearing their characters, mobilizing in the United States, the media attacking those figures as well, meeting with far-right radicals, whatever, you know the drill. And then a lot of those people just thought, well, maybe I don't think it's worth it talking to these people if that's the type of storm that it unleashes, and it damaged a lot of our relations with contacts that we had in the United States. So this time around, we were like, we're not making that mistake again. The relationships and the networks and the contacts that we have are a lot more valuable to us in the long term, and the meetings that we get through those contacts are a lot more valuable than the quick fame that you get through posting a picture or telling the media who you met with, because that's why they're so desperate to know who we met with, because then they can attack those people, then they can slander them, then they can target them and try to get them to stop talking to AfriForum, because they just make it not worth it. They just make their life, they try to ruin their careers, they try to smear them, they try to get them in trouble. And then a lot of those contacts, the previous round in 2018, just decided, well, we care about this cause in South Africa. These guys seem to be nice, but at the same time, it's just not worth it to be subjected to this type of vicious attack if you meet with them. So, I mean, that's the lesson that we learned in 2018. I think it's the right call.
I agree, and it just shows the maturity of some people and the immaturity of others. So, for instance, I had an interview which I embargoed willingly. I did the work, I traveled, spent money, spent my day doing the interview, and I embargoed it because I was asked to do it. It wasn't in the interest of the party involved for me to show that at the time until after they completed what they were doing next. You know, I see the behavior of Jeffrey Goldberg from The Atlantic, rushing off. Look, I was in a signal session. I mean, why in the world would you tell the public that? That's ridiculous. Yeah. I mean, endangering national security. You should have told the administration that about, hey, you guys made a mistake and included me in here.
Yeah, but that would be my first reaction. Is like, there's been a massive mistake here. There's huge security risks here. I'm very sorry. I just want to bring this to your attention. But no, that didn't happen in that signal situation that you're talking about there. I've just been perusing some of the facts there. I'm not too clued up on all the details. From what I can see, it was a journalist that pretty much said, if I lurk here, maybe I can get a juicy story.
And that's exactly what it was. And it's a juicy story to undermine and destroy the Trump administration, which has been hitting on all cylinders. They've had no real hiccups other than bogus judicial decisions by circuit court judges who have no such authority. They have no authority over the entire nation. They're applying injunctions which are illegal. And this is going to come to a head. There's going to be serious conflict between two of the three co-equal branches of government at the federal level, the Supreme Court and the executive branch, because of the overarching effort of like the Ninth Circuit Court in California and others and local judges in D.C. District Court who are making decisions that apply to the entire nation, and they have no authority. They only have authority over what appears in their court that affects that region they're in. And so that's going to come to a head. But look, I mean, it's just it really irritates me because you see that media outlets are not media. They're not the fourth estate. They're not fulfilling the role of holding government accountable. And in South Africa, they're facilitating the conduct of the ANC. They're facilitating the narrative. They're facilitating propaganda with constant lies and distortions, misleading things. And this is why so few people pay attention to them. Look, I saw the statistics the other day, and I'm not boasting or crowing anything, but with this recent surge in viewership on my channel, I would right now be almost in the top 10 of media outlets in South Africa. And I'm just one dude sitting in my studio in central Pennsylvania who's not even South African covering South Africa. And it's not the only thing I cover. That shows you how desperate people are to get the truth. They're tired of this lamestream, fake stream media that you have, especially in South Africa.
You're absolutely correct there, Chris. The hunger for news has not gone away. That hunger is as intense as ever. People have just realized that the traditional vehicles or legacy vehicles or platforms where they used to be getting that truth, they can no longer trust to provide them with that truth. It's the same, you see it in South Africa with News 24 launching a disinformation desk and then everyone mocking them in the comments saying, you couldn't even fact check whether Jan Braai gave someone a boerewors roll or not.
Well, I mean, I think if they're going to start, they should just start with all of their news stories that are not news stories, that are op-ed, disguised as news. I mean, when you put adjectives in there in your news story, it's not a news story. It is a op-ed. You are giving your opinion. You can have opinion, but you keep that on the op-ed page. You don't put that in breaking news. It's just really sad to see this. Although I will give News 24 credit. One of their journalists, and he's a real journalist because he did a real story, did a breaking story, which isn't really breaking, but the way it's written up, you can call it a breaking story about the only 6 aircraft operational in the South African Air Force. There was no opinion in that story. It was all factual. All the data was there. He reported on it. That's brilliant. I mean, I almost fell out of my chair when I read that. I'm like, this really came from News 24? Wow, it must have evaded the editors. Adrian Basson didn't get a chance to put some opinion in there. You're on mute.
Oh, I'm just going to close another window here because it just started pouring rain now here.
There's no rain. There's no rain. See? All you got to do is ask for it to show up and it comes. Yeah, folks, hit the like button if you haven't. We really appreciate that. People get wrapped up in the conversation. They don't realize that they haven't hit the like button. So hit the like button.
I'm very grateful.
Yeah, I've also got the alert system turned off, so we're not interfering. But that shouldn't dissuade you from giving super chats and likes to the program. Don't forget, a lot of people get wrapped up and listen to what we're saying, and they forget to hit the like button. And despite YouTube censorship, that does actually drive the algorithm, the interaction of people in the chat, the likes and the comments on the video. What were you saying? You're happy the rain finally came?
Yeah, I'm very grateful for the rain. As I said, as someone that spends my hobby time in the garden, I'm very glad that we're getting blessed with some rain here. But also, Chris, I just wanted to give some credit as well to when you were talking about the information war that's going on. It immediately just reminded me of a piece by that name called "The Information War Against AfriForum" that was written by investigative journalist Marie-Louise Antoine. Yes, they are actually still very good investigative journalists out there, and she wrote a piece for Politics Web, called the Information War Against AfriForum, and it's very detailed. I mean, if you're going to read it, put some time aside. It is very, very meticulous, but I mean, that's what an investigative journalist does. They do the work, they do the research, and they get to the core of the truth. And what she did was she mapped the entire timeline, how the narrative was shifted from when Trump made his first post on the 2nd of February, South Africa waking up on the 3rd of February, the South African government and media responding very tamely in regards to almost being shell-shocked. And then when they get their bearings, they immediately switch over to, well, they first admit that, this cutting off of US aid has already happened. This is not something that's new now. And then a few hours later, almost like a memo went out, the blame AfriForum narrative comes in, because then they realized, well, here's a perfect scapegoat that we can use to try and avoid all types of taking responsibility for our own actions. So, I mean, that piece I highly recommend to anyone that's interested specifically in how the propaganda machine in South Africa works. It's called The Information War Against AfriForum on Politics Web, a platform that's been doing fantastic work. I'm a proud supporter of their platform. I'm a paid subscriber there. If you're going to be paying for a news platform like a breaking news platform or a news analysis platform that's text-based, Politics Web is definitely one that I would recommend. And Marie-Louise Antoine in that piece has there's a lot of fantastic quotes, but there's one that really sticks out where she says, whereas the South African media, instead of being watchdogs against the abuse of power, they rather saw their responsibility as being the attack dogs of the regime. And that's exactly what we've seen. And it's not just in this episode of South Africa being in the spotlight. We saw that happening multiple times over the years. I'll never forget 2018 when President Ramaphosa went to New York on an international platform to spread misinformation, when he said that and I quote, this is not a paraphrase, there are no murdering of farmers or white farmers in South Africa. There are no land grabs in South Africa, end quote. And what happened after that quote, or after he spread that genuine, like undeniable misinformation? Oh, the media fact check him? No, they didn't. They wrote opinion pieces titled "What the President Meant to Say." That's like Pravda. That is when you are serving the regime, not keeping its feet to the fire. I mean, that's just one example of so many. The editors of I noticed this when I did that interview with Stephen Grootes at the beginning of February, where he was attacking me in that interview for like, how dare AfriForum do this? It was almost like the start of this whole blame AfriForum wave. It was one of the first interviews AfriForum did when this whole episode started. And someone after that interview brought it to my attention that at the end of last year, Stephen Grootes, journalist, wrote an opinion piece titled "Why Ramaphosa is My Leader of the Year," or like my Man of the Year. And I'm like, what are you doing? That you're on the one side trying to claim you're like this paragon of objectivity. On the other side, you're like the Kaiser is the best and infallible. There's nothing wrong that he can do. Nobody dare criticize him. I mean, you can't have the best of both worlds, but I mean, that's why in South Africa there's a lot of media that is genuinely state-captured media. And we saw it just once again the past few months just really be emphasized, that when even to the point where the minister in the presidency thanks the media in an interview, where she's just like, I just want to take a moment to thank the media for helping fight all this misinformation and get the ANC's message out there, because that helps us so we don't have to fight alone. I'm like, yeah, well, nothing says independent journalism like the government thanking you for your service, now does it?
Exactly. There's nothing like admitting that they are simply media wings of the government, which is what many of these outlets are. It's really sad to see. I mean, years ago, Mail and Guardian was a pretty independent outlet that did a great job sharing information, doing reporting, and then it just sort of slid left. The Daily Maverick for a long time was mostly good reporting. Their investigative reporting is very strong. But they've gone from an 80-20 to a 70-60 to 65-35, now down to a 50-50. 50% of the stuff is reliable, 50% is just leftist garbage and propaganda. It's really sad to see that happen, because when I did the Great Decisions brief about South Africa's fragile democracy for the Army War College back in 2018, which is available online, people watch it. When I did that, I was much more generous to South Africa. I said one of the strong things about South Africa, at least up until 2018, is you have robust independent media, many of whom were holding the government to account. And of course, this was, the state capture era was coming to an end with Zuma about to be out. And so they were going after Zuma. And that's why I was talking about independent and strong media. But they have been complicit in the actions of the government, its failures. I mean, we talk about the receipts. Here's a receipt. 3 times as many black South Africans live in abject poverty today as they did under the height of apartheid. Education standards are worse today for black South Africans than they were under apartheid. Outcomes are worse than they were under apartheid. And you talk about those 142 laws, you only have to look at the outcomes there. Look at the results of those laws. But here's the thing that few people talk about, Ernst. Those laws which oppress minority South Africans, in particular white South Africans, but also coloreds and Indians to a degree as well, they hurt everybody. It's like the Tourism Relief Fund. When the Tourism Relief Fund was created during the COVID scam, it was a very small amount of money, so it wasn't going to save any businesses unless you had a tuck shop or you sold, wood carvings on the side of the road, or you had a combi where you're transporting people back and forth. But the Tourism Relief Fund was only for historically disadvantaged individuals, read black. And so what happened? Well, it was taken to court, and the North Gauteng High Court said that it's constitutional. What? All right. But the thing is that it accomplished what they wanted. They gave all the money they had allocated out to historically disadvantaged. It went to Supreme Court of Appeal where it was overturned because it's unconstitutional. And by then there was no money. But who was harmed by that? Everyone. Because if a lodge is owned by a white South African, whom do they employ? People from Alpha Centauri? From another planet, another galaxy? No, they employ South Africans. And who are those South Africans tend to be who make up the majority of the workforce? Black South Africans. So lodge owners have black South Africans that are their managers, they're their clerks at the desk, they're their maids, they're cooks, they're game wardens. It's just stupid beyond belief. And all of these racial laws undermine all of society, and they denigrate everybody, and then they put a major break, and they allow for so much corruption, so much patronage to take place that it really that's why South Africa's collapsing. Point not.
Right, and what I've noticed, the very uncomfortable fact for the pro-discrimination South Africans, I think that's what we should start calling them, people that support these race laws. And the thing that I've noticed is that if you put the graph of the amount of race laws on the books and you compare it to the graph of the unemployment rate, it's the same graph. Like, as the amount of racially discriminatory laws and race laws increase, the unemployment rate increases. So it's not even that that the government is using immoral discriminatory policies to get just ends to empower people and decrease unemployment. No, they're using immoral policies and getting nothing in return except empowering a new elite, a new cadre class of those with the right political connections. BEE is a very, very exclusive club, and you and me and a lot of other people, well, the majority of South Africans, black and white, are not in it. And that's the key difference here when it comes to specifically what you hear the ANC say when they say, well, this is what we're trying to achieve with this policy, and what is actually happening. That's why I think we should be using the biblical principle of judging a tree by its fruit. And the fruits of this racially discriminatory tree are absolutely bitter. And the thing that really just what proves that the people, the pro-discrimination South Africans, know that they're doing something wrong is that at the back of their mind, they know these laws are wrong because they can't bring themselves to call it what it is. They always use euphemisms. Oh, it's redress. It's affirmative action. It is transformation. Never it's racially discriminatory laws. What it is, no, that they vehemently deny. But if you look at the nature of these laws, that is what they are. They discriminate based on race. So that indicates to me that they do at the back of their mind know that these laws are messed up, that they are wrong, that they are not achieving what they should be achieving, that they are achieving very skewed outcomes. But at the same time, as I said, they want to furiously protect their right to discriminate. That's what the ANC is doing. They want to be able to discriminate based on race, and they don't see anything wrong with racial discrimination in principle. They only see a problem with racial discrimination when it targets the wrong people. When it targets the right people, they see no problem with it. AfriForum and myself view racial discrimination as wrong in principle. It's wrong in the past, it's wrong in the present. That's what makes it so easy to go into these debates, because it's just you stick to your principles. But the pro-discrimination South Africans, they have to be flip-flopping constantly. You're like, oh, well, if you look at it from this angle, you have to understand it in this context. You have to apply all these different complex moral sources in order to justify it. I can just say, no, racially discriminatory hiring practices are wrong. kicking sports teams out of tournaments because they don't meet the race criteria that the government puts out there is wrong. Not funding organizations that fight gender-based violence because their management is too white is wrong. Telling a 9-year-old child that she is not going to make the sports team because she has the wrong skin color is wrong. That's why it's so easy. It's just you stick to your principle because your principle is solid ground. And if you're a pro-discrimination South African, your principles are wonky.
Well, it's comical to see the leftists try to paint people as white supremacists, saying that everybody's the same. We're all equal. No one should get advantage based on skin color, or no one should get disadvantage based on skin color. Yet you're painted as a right winger, or as it's ludicrous. That's a traditional liberal value. It's a center left value, and people who espouse it today are called racists and white supremacists. It's beyond ridiculous.
To sum it up, really, what we're demanding is radical normality.
Yeah, exactly. It's amazing, and then of course it comes with the whataboutisms. Where were you during apartheid? Well, Ernst, I don't think you were around. I was around.
No, I was around. No.
I was around, and I was doing something very different. So I mean, it really doesn't matter what.
My answer there is always very clear. When people ask, well, you wouldn't have defended racial discrimination. You would have defended racial discrimination under apartheid, wouldn't you? I'm like, well, I wasn't born, but you know who is alive during a period of racially discriminatory laws? You and me. And who's taking a stance now against those racially discriminatory laws? Me, and not you. I mean, that's the key. What's happening in the present? It's very easy to say, well, you would have said this in the past, or you would have done this in the past. I'm like, no, what's happening in the present? And let's see what we are doing, how we're reacting to that present. That's how I judge whether someone is principled. Not whether they say, well, in the past I would have done this, or in the past you would have done this. I'm like, no, we are currently living with racially discriminatory laws in the present, in existence, and who is defending them and who is opposing them. That's all that matters, because that you can actually measure, that you can actually see. I don't care about speculation about what you would have done in the past or what I would have done in the past. The real factor at the end of the day is, what are you doing in the present in the face of discriminatory laws?
But Ernst, you don't understand. In 1808, when my ancestors attacked the Trek Boers near Graaf Reinet, and we killed their families and took their cattle back to our kraal, when they attacked and took the cattle back and occupied the land, that's land theft. You owe me. I want redress for what happened in 1808 when I attacked your ancestors. I mean, come on, man.
I've got some, when it comes to redress, I mean, that's the other thing, is specifically when it comes to the whole land debate. Theo de Jager in the documentary makes some fantastic points regarding that. But there's one central point here. AfriForum is not against the redress system that has been in place, the redress system where if you were dispossessed by the previous regime and you bring proof that you were dispossessed, you can get your land back. The majority, according to the Department of Land Reform, 90% of people who have successful land claims opt for money rather than getting the land back. Another hate fact, if you want to put it that way. But AfriForum stance is that restitution process based on fair compensation, not expropriation without compensation. The people that currently have that land that are restituted don't get dispossessed of their land without compensation. They are paid fair market value compensation. That's a fair system. That is actually real restitution, and it's not a zero-sum game where you just create a new generation of dispossessed people. But no, that system is not good enough, because it has just been completely derailed by corruption, by mismanagement. It's been just a complete disaster in regards to those with the right political connections getting farms, getting land, those with actual proof of being dispossessed in the past getting either nothing, or when they get a piece of land, they are promised all of this support from the government to get the farm going, and they don't get any of that support. So no, the restitution process that was established many decades ago, that is based on a foundation of fair and market value compensation, that is actually a reasonable way of going about this whole land debate. But no, that's not good enough according to the pro-discrimination people and the pro-expropriation people, because for them it's about revenge. We can't have a fair system where nobody loses. We need a system where someone gets punished. We need revenge. That's the R word. Redress is just the fake R word for the real R word called revenge. That's what a lot of these politicians are pushing. Not the average guy on the street. The average guy on the street in South Africa doesn't care about land. That's by far not his first priority. The fact that 90% of successful land claimants take money rather than the land, I mean, proves that on its own. But multiple opinion polls and polling on the South African population have proven time and time again that the average man on the street cares about good quality education for his children, having a job, and living in a safe environment free from crime. That's what the average person wants. Every single opinion poll that is done on South Africans points to the same result every single time.
Yeah, well, that's something I've talked about endlessly. This is not about redress. It's about revenge. It's about racial revenge. And the irony is that they're taking it on people who weren't even born. They're born free. The majority of South Africans were born after apartheid. This nonsense is going on about redress for something. And as I've covered endlessly, there were 75,000 land claims from 1995 to 1999. The window was opened by the ANC itself. Over 74,000 of those land claims were settled over 2.5 decades ago. Most people took financial compensation. We can have a legitimate argument about whether that was fair amount of compensation for what they lost, and I would argue in many cases it wasn't. But they accepted it, and they weren't pressured to accept it. Others who kept their land claim going, some of those still have yet to be redressed. But then, unfortunately, Jacob Zuma opened up an illegitimate second window, which got another 141,000 claims under his administration, most of which were duplicative. And here's the other piece of this argument, which people don't talk about, and I've said all along because I've watched this unfold in Zimbabwe and predicted exactly what was going to happen 2.5 decades ago, and this is what's happening again. A lot of the land that's been transferred to black South Africans has failed, and they sold the land on. And who buys it? White farmers. So then they go, look, the whites own this land. Well, it's already been restored and restituted, and the people couldn't manage it. So are white people never allowed to ever buy that land again? You cannot include land that's been redressed back into the pot of redress. And let's just cover this very quickly. So the last land audit was in 2017. And I'm sick of hearing Ronnie Lamola lie to Deutsche Welle about whites own 80% of the land. There are 114 million hectares of land on the surface of South Africa. 93 million in 2017 were privately owned by individuals, corporations, trusts, things like that. Of the 93 million hectares of land, that means 21% of the land was owned by the government in 2017. So 93 million hectares remain. Of that, 36 million were categorized by the government as agricultural holdings. A lot of that is, scrubland in the Karoo where goats and sheep eat bushes, eat the fen moss.
Where you need a farm the size of a small country to feed 10 sheep.
Exactly. It's like ranching in Montana. You need 100,000 acres to make money. So 36% of the land is controlled by whites in 2017 of the farmland. Or 36 million hectares, 26 million of that was owned by white South Africans. So that's 72%. That's where the 72% figure comes from. It was 72% of land designated farmland or for agriculture. However, that represents just 29% of privately held land. It represents just 23% of the total surface area of South Africa. So when Ronnie Lamola tells the world that the whites own 80% of the land, it's a lie. Whites 7 years ago owned just 23% of the surface area of South Africa. Now, we can argue and make the fair statement that much of that is agricultural land. That's the prime agricultural land, and maybe that's unfair. But then you also have to look at the fact that much of that was disused, not agricultural land, simply used by nomadic herders who were there seasonally, and it's been turned into prime agricultural land through the improvements, through fertilization, through irrigation, and the modern farming techniques. So this argument is just ridiculous.
To add to that, Chris, I mean, you've expertly dismantled it, but to add to that, there's no way to determine the racial makeup of land ownership in South Africa. The government used surnames as their methodological approach. I mean, if I remember correctly, but as any Afrikaner will tell you, most Afrikaans surnames have black people that have those surnames as well. You can't use surnames as a scientific metric for race. It's not a scientifically solid way to do it.
Well, that's something I don't know. I don't know that that was the methodology used, and it may very well have been.
I'm talking under correction. That's how I remember they did it. There's no other way to determine racial makeup.
I got
of
you,
land
but let's throw that out, because that makes it even worse. But let's throw that out. But even with just the pure facts from the most recent data, which is 7 years old, government study, not Ernst van Zyl, not Chris Wyatt we didn't do it. The government of South Africa did this in a land audit in 2017. And the facts of the matter are that white South Africans at the time, white entities, owned just 23% of the surface area of the entire country, 29% of the agricultural land. It's ludicrous to say the least. Is it unfair? No, because it's stupidity to make this argument. Here's the other argument. Millions of hectares of land are currently available. I can buy a farm in South Africa right now. It's go to Pam Golding, go to all the real estate agents. There's land there. The government has the means to do it. But the government allocated, before they split the ministry, now that the land issue belongs to the radical leftist black supremacist party instead of the Department of Agriculture, before that was split, the most recent budget, $35 million is what they allocated for land acquisition. $35 million. That included all the lawyers' fees, the actual prices for land. You can't buy a wine estate in the Western Cape for $35 million US dollars. That's a joke. Meanwhile, they dedicated hundreds of millions of dollars to ludicrous things that were wasted. So it's never been taken seriously. It's been abused, and it's been used as a cudgel because it's a useful way to convince the low information voters and the poorly informed and low education voters that this is a racial thing when it's not. It's a macroeconomic, it's a government policy thing. There's been plenty of time for redress. There's been plenty of time to provide vocational training and implements and seed and fertilizer and funding and grants to help aspiring black farmers get into the marketplace. Most of the aspiring black farmers have been successful in the space, whether it's in the macadamia nut industry or it's in poultry or something like that, have been a consequence of their commercial white farming neighbors who've helped them get a step up when the government failed to help them. That's the bottom line. And the other, before I finish, the other argument with this is that the ANC has argued for years that they want to put 1 million black South Africans on farms. Subsistence farming. Instead of teaching them how to do math and teaching them in schools how to do coding, robotics, artificial intelligence, moving into the fourth industrial revolution, they want to go back to the first industrial revolution, back to ancient Sumeria, and have subsistence farmers who are desperately poor, dependent on rains, dependent on weather.
A feudal system.
They want a feudal system, exactly what they want, because it works for them, because they're a bunch of communists.
But also, Chris, I just want to add in regards to the what is available for redistribution. Well, there's about 17 million hectares of land that the state owns. That's a very big number. Even I sometimes struggle to quantify just how much that is. But to help the audience see in their mind's eye, that is the surface area of the provinces of Mpumalanga and KwaZulu-Natal combined. That's how much farmland or how much land the state owns. Millions of those hectares are prime farmland. What happens to that? Oh, it just hoards more. It doesn't redistribute any of it. It doesn't hand out private title deeds to any of it. They just hoard more and more and more. And now the ANC wants to just get more power to hoard even more land. So my challenge to the South African government is show us the proof that you are able to redistribute land in your possession. You can start with the 17 million hectares of land that you already have, but they can't because they don't want to.
I would be happy to see an audit of the 3.9 million hectares of land that have been purchased under the willing buyer, willing seller program over the past number of years. 3.9 million hectares. That is about 4% of the available private land. Where has that gone? How has that been used? I already have examples of failed farms in KwaZulu-Natal. Also, this game ranch that was never expropriated, but really pushed in expropriation, and it was sold for a coal mining company based in Australia with boards of directors from China on it, and no coal mining was ever done. Now it belongs to a Saudi prince, and the people actually had a claim to the land, a legitimate claim land, got nothing, and so it did redress anything there. But this whole thing goes back to the dishonesty of the whole argument here. If the government of South Africa actually cared about poor black South Africans, this is the bottom line. They could fix something overnight. Billions of dollars, not rand, billions of dollars of dead capital are sitting on the ground in South Africa. What am I talking about? The title deeds and the property ownership of RDP housing, which is state-owned land. It's a small amount of land, but it's numerous holdings, hundreds of thousands, if not a few million holdings. Transfer the title deed to those RDP houses to the current occupants today. What's stopping you? Transfer it. Do it right now. You will free up billions of dollars of capital, because now if I live in an RDP house in Northwest outside of Swartrugens. I want to start a tuck shop. I've got no money. I go to the bank. They laugh at me. What, you don't have a job? You don't have any money? Where's your collateral? I'm not going to loan you money. Well, now I've got a house, a crappy house, and I've got a plot of land, small plot of land, but it's collateral, something the bank can take back if I fail to pay back my loan, and gives me incentive to pay back my loan on time. So all that dead capital sitting there, we saw this in Peru. We saw land reform take place, proper land reform, where peasants were granted title deed to the land that they were on. It wasn't stolen land, but it's land they never had to deed to, just because of the way they allocated, legal possession of land. They turned it over to the peasants in agriculture, and agriculture bloomed, and people got better educations, and tax revenue came in, and poverty was alleviated for millions of people in Peru. Hernando de Soto, not the famous explorer, but a modern Peruvian economist, wrote about this. And so South Africa has gone the wrong direction, because it's not about the poor, Ernst. It's not about black South Africans. It's about revenge. It's about cater enrichment. It's about privilege. It's about blue light escorts. It's about the arrogance of an elite who give two shakes of a rat's ass about the poor or about anyone else. Whites are convenient targets, so they'll use them to their advantage. Land is a convenient lie. And meanwhile, out the back door, we've got the arms deal, we've got PPE, we've got the energy gate, we've got oil gate, we've got travel gate, we've got Nkandla, we've got one scandal after another, digital vibes, the dairy, raided dairy farm, we've got the asbestos tenders, we've got Zandile Gumeda setting records with 178 criminal charges. This is all going on around South Africans, and they're not being held to account. No one's being held to account.
I also just want to give you to add something more to our previous topic of the whole U.S. South Africa diplomatic crisis. Even when you mentioned scapegoating now there, even when AfriForum and Solidarity were designated public enemy number one by the ANC and its allies, I was still walking around in the streets of South Africa in public with my AfriForum shirt, and I didn't get any negative responses. I didn't get any harassment. I wasn't stopped or attacked or insulted, or I didn't even get a dirty look. I did get a lot of nods. I did get a lot of acknowledgements. I did get a lot of smiles. Didn't get any negative responses at all. And that just shows once again that disconnect between the bubble online and the bubble that these elites live in and what's actually happening in the real world. I have no fear of walking around in crowded public spaces in South Africa with my AfriForum shirt, because up until this point, it hasn't really caused me any problems. Actually gets me a lot of very pleasant responses. You can ask my wife. She always mocks me about the fact of saying, "Oh well, there you go again. I'm married to a celebrity, it seems."
Well, it matches with my experience in South Africa. The bottom line with it is that this racism, this stupidity, this nonsense is the domain of the elites in the media, in politics, in business. These are the people who push this stuff. And you have to ask yourself, for what gain? What is the motivation? The average, you alluded to it earlier, I've said endless over and over again, the average South African I've met, black, white, and brown, and those who attack me and call me names, they don't bother to point out, me going to Rietvlei south of Zeerust and interviewing go-go's who've been living on this disused slate mine for 30 years with no services, no paved roads, no water, nothing, no electricity, and reporting their plight. They don't cover that because it doesn't fit their narrative. This is their narrative. It's not the world South Africans live. I showed that video, reshowed it now that I have a larger audience, because when I was there in 2022 or 2023 filming that, I showed it. Not many people saw it, just a couple hundred. Now thousands have seen it because of a much larger audience, and eyes are being opened. Some people who watch my program don't realize just how desperately some South Africans live, including black South Africans, because it's not their world. They're not, and it's not the world they see every day. So I show them that world. But these people live in an intentional bubble, and they spew this racial hatred. They spew this economic hatred, this class envy, because it serves their needs. It serves their purposes. So who was served by netball, the semifinal in the Telecom Netball Championships in 2020, when one team won the game 43-42 in dramatic fashion, only to be disqualified after the game? And why were they disqualified? Because of racial quotas. And it's not what you think. It wasn't because there were too many white girls on the team. It's because there were too many black women on the court. What happened? One of the white players was injured, so they couldn't put two white players on the court at the same time. So the black player came in for part of the second period and filled in while that person's injury was treated, and then that girl came back. But after the game, they lost the game because there were too many black players. Look at the ludicrous outcomes when you base things on race. Base it on merit. Base it on talent, base it on performance, not on skin color, because you and I can't change our skin color, and neither can a black person. And no one should. They should all be proud of who they are inside their skin.
Yeah.
No one should be ashamed of that. It's ridiculous.
And when you mentioned that bubble as well, I mean, we saw the most bizarre trend on social media that first 2 weeks when Donald Trump shone the spotlight in South Africa and talked about the very bad things happening in South Africa. You saw the top 1% of the top 1% of this country go rushing to social media to post photographs and videos of them chilling next to their luxurious pools, chilling in their massive farm-sized garden.
Not getting the irony that they're showing off just how elite and disconnected they are from everybody.
Exactly. In their houses that resemble palaces. Now and again, you do see the electric fences. Now and again, you do see the high walls. But I mean, just don't pay any attention to that. They went to social media to make all these posts about their like grossly luxurious lives, and then say, "Well, look at the bad things happening in South Africa." And I'm just sitting there thinking, must be nice. Must be nice that you are just completely shielded from the horrors out there in South Africa, the things that us plebs, the regular people out there witness on a regular basis. I'm very, very glad that you can just live in this perfectly shielded environment. Good for you. How lucky, how privileged. The rest of us don't live that way. It was the most bizarre, like, let them eat cake moment that I've seen in a long time, of just like, how can there be any problems in South Africa? Look at this beautiful mountain view that I have from my stoep.
Well, that's the peasants. The peasants they just have to look. It's about countries and geopolitics. This saying, and it comes from Thucydides, the Peloponnesian War. It's from the Malian Dialogue, which you're probably familiar with. But the Malian Dialogue, it's the Thucydides. The Malians are being attacked on an island by Athens, and they're like, what? This is unfair. We didn't do anything. We're not your enemy. And they come and they kill all the men and they take all the women off and they destroy the colony of Malea. And so they're defending themselves and they're saying, well, this isn't right. And so the Athenians say, look, the strong will do what they like and the weak will suffer what they must. The elites will do what they like and the peasants will suffer what they must. And that's their attitude. Not just there. It's the same over here. It's the same in Europe. And it's a reason why people have to take responsibility for governance and get involved and get rid of this riffraff that are ruling over the world.
Yeah, you know what I would really like to see is some of these farm murder denialists. I'd like them to see them go visit some isolated farm in South Africa, and then the farmer, when it's dark, the farmer tells them, I think I'm just going to turn off the electric fencing tonight. Let's leave some of these doors unlocked. What do you guys say? How you feel about that? There's no danger here, right? You told us everything is fine. You wanna sleep with your door open tonight here on the farm? I mean, what seems to be the issue?
Yeah, no, I mean, look, I get flooded with my WhatsApp now. I'm getting photographs of people and my emails showing me where their fence was cut last night, and and it's sending me videos of people trying to break in their door on their rural farmsteads, and someone whose foot was nearly chopped off by a panga by someone who attacked him. It's horrifying, and the denialism is pathetic. It just shows me. All right, so at a minimum, the Saps and Kunu, and of course the cat in the hat who's now gone, thank goodness, but they could be honest and say, listen, there is a rural security problem and there is vicious crime that takes place. It's currently not a priority. We're focused on other things, but it is something we must address. How about that admission? You're going to deny the death of black, white, and brown South Africans in rural South Africa, a 4-month pregnant Indian woman on the Ayub farm whose throat was slit from ear to ear and she bled out in her bathroom while her 4- and 6-year-old children were crying in the bedroom next door. And you're going to deny the brutal slaying of Edward Neumeister, who was bludgeoned to death and cut apart with a panga and bled out over his closed German-themed restaurant during lockdown, or what happened to Brendan Horner, tortured and left as a warning to others by domestic terrorists, probably even the police. We don't know. That still hasn't been resolved. Or Sefetso Pule, who was hung from a tree, 9-month pregnant because her lover found her inconvenient because he was married, and so he hired someone to murder her, or the UCT student who went to the post office and then was lured back there and raped and murdered by. Look, you cannot deny this sort of thing, but they do. They do, and they always turn to, well, when white people talk about it's not real. Well, it's real for everybody. It's real for everybody. It's unfortunate. It's sad.
But there's also another element at play here, Chris, and that there is a uniqueness to farm murders in regards to how it's being treated. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but farm murders are the only violent crime phenomenon where people genuinely believe that it's acceptable and praiseworthy to call the victims liars. I can't think of any other violent crime where that's the case. I also can't think of another violent crime phenomenon that journalists openly joke about on social media. That's also one of the things that makes farm murders quite unique. Also, farm murders are the only violent crime phenomenon where raising awareness about daring to raise awareness about this issue means that you are shamelessly insulted, mocked, and slandered. And also, it's the only violent crime phenomenon where it's openly romanticized and encouraged by chants like kill the boer, kill the farmer on Human Rights Day this year. Yeah. And then there's just denialism. Oh no, it's not incitement to violence. I'm like, yeah, the chant that goes kill the boer, and if you're still confused about what I'm talking about, kill the farmer, that chant, yeah, that's completely harmless, just a metaphor. One of my favorite Zapiro cartoons before ideology ate holes in his brain is one where he drew a farm murder and the two farm attackers running away, and over the radio it's saying ANC says kill the boer, kill the farmer is just a metaphor, and the one farm murderer looks at the other one and says, what's a metaphor? So I mean, that's the other thing. And then also, farm murders are the only violent crime phenomenon where the knee-jerk reaction of some people is to immediately dismiss it by reciting South Africa's general murder statistics, like saying, "Well,
so that makes it better."
South Africa, that makes it better. But that doesn't happen to other violent crime phenomenons. I've never seen an interview where an activist against gender-based violence is speaking about their legitimate cause, and then the interviewer is like, but you have to remember the vast majority of murder victims are men. Do you ever consider that? No, that never happens. Same with rhino poaching. Activists against rhino poaching goes on an interview, or there's a hit piece written about them saying, yeah, well, what these rhino poaching activists don't take into account is that the vast majority of animals that are killed in a year, out of that majority, only a tiny fraction are rhinos. No, because that would be absolutely absurd and bizarre to say that. But for some reason, when it's a violent crime phenomenon that affects farmers, that's the knee-jerk reaction from a lot of people. And then lastly, farm murders are the only violent crime phenomenon openly denied by the South African president. 2018, there are no murdering of white farmers or farmers in South Africa. President Ramaphosa on an international stage never retracted, never apologized. That's the thing.
He just lied.
Bloomberg I can't look at all these facts about farm murders and then people tell me, oh, it's just, what are you complaining about? I'm like, have you seen, are we watching the same movie?
No, we're not watching the same movie. And speaking of that and fact checks, so News 24, because some people's social media started recirculating that photograph from closed circuit television from 2015, which I covered. I covered in 2015. But I did that on LinkedIn because I was not on other social media doing this sort of thing because I was still serving the Army. But in 2015, I pointed out that image and said, hey, listen, this is a syndicate. This is organized. I mean, those are cell phone jammers. Those are military grade at the time. That is a police issued service weapon in a proper holster. And these guys are wearing smart dress and they're cutting through a fence and they're attacking a farm. This isn't revenge. This isn't a crime of opportunity. This is well planned, well orchestrated. And I'm well aware of that phenomenon because I saw what happened to a farmer who was Norwegian in Elandskal near Rorksdrift back in the year 2000. 70-plus-year-old farmer pistol whipped to death because they stole the money from his workers he picked up at the bank that day. So this photograph started recirculating recently, and News 24 felt compelled to do a fact check on it. So their fact check was, well, this is an old photograph from 2015. Yeah. Well, so that proves that farms aren't being attacked. And the claim that it costs 390,000 Rand isn't true. This can be purchased for 20,000 Rand. today.
Yeah, we've all just got 20,000 rand lying around. Average South African, just under in his couch cushions.
But this needle knows it doesn't even address the fact. The fact here is this a legitimate photograph? Yes, a legitimate photograph. It did happen, and yes, it happened in 2015. And yes, there are people recirculating it today to draw attention to farm attacks. It doesn't mean that farm attacks and murders don't occur. It just means that maybe people don't realize because they didn't look at the timestamp or forgotten the event that it occurred 9 years ago. But it doesn't diminish the fact that it occurred. It doesn't diminish the fact at the time that was something that the general public didn't have, that cell phone jammer, and the general public doesn't have access to service revolvers from the police. That is something.
The point stands.
But that's their fact check, and they just look ridiculous. Andrew Thompson, I think, is the guy who put this up there. It's shameful.
Yeah. That the same happened also with the quote unquote fact check. As I said, the blog post masquerading as a fact check about my documentary, is the documentary that the Is Trump Right About South Africa one, where I didn't read the whole fact check because I'm not paying a fee to read someone's diary entry or to read their blog post.
Where was this? Was this News 24?
On News 24, yeah.
Well, I do have the paywall, so just tell me send me a link in the article and I'll read it.
You can go check it out, yeah. But one of the things that someone told me is in the article is they say, because in my documentary I play a clip in the intro almost to like set the mood of firstly Robert Mugabe saying keep your England and let me keep my Zimbabwe, and then Ramaphosa like literally mimics him, says the exact same thing to Donald Trump, keep your USA and let me keep my South Africa, even mimicking the hand gestures. And then the fact check is like, well, this is part of a larger speech. Yes, it is part of a larger speech that doesn't really disprove the fact that Ramaphosa appears to be very clearly a dictator Robert Mugabe enthusiast, very clearly trying to emulate. But when Elon Musk does a hand gesture that vaguely resembles in a certain light from a certain angle a Sig Heil, then News 24 is like, Elon Musk is confirmed Nazi. But it's just, that's the caliber of fact checking that we're subjected to in South Africa.
Yep, that's because it's not fact checking; it's propaganda spreading. These are people with honey wagons. Are you familiar with the phrase honey wagon?
No, enlighten me.
All right, so in agriculture in the West, in the U.S. anyway, we have what's called honey wagon. Those are the fertilizer machines where the manure is mixed with fluid to get a slurry going, and then it's spread out the back, and it reeks badly. So people say honey wagon. You know, it's a euphemism. So the honey wagon is the shit stir that stirs the shit that goes out on the thing. So that's what this is. It's just a honey wagon. That's all this is.
Yeah, Chris, but at the end of the day, I think I just keep getting reminded of the importance of alternative media. It just gets underlined every single time. You need an alternative. Because as I said earlier, the hunger for news is not going anywhere. People are as hungry as ever for the news and for analysis. What they don't have the stomach for, however, is being blatantly lied to their face, firstly, and secondly, having their intelligence insulted and it being talked down to, of saying, if you dare to believe or not agree with me on X, Y, and Z, you're dumb, you're a barbarian, you're uneducated pleb. I'm me, the educated, enlightened editor of prestigious news outlet, is here to enlighten you and bring you the truth, because you with your primitive little mind can't grasp the reality that you see around you. Don't believe your lying eyes and ears. I'm here to tell you the truth. It feels like I'm exaggerating, but that every time I read any of these pieces, that it just oozes with that type of attitude of like, the priest has now arrived to enlighten you about the true meaning of what you are seeing. And luckily the alternative media is there to just say, well, if you think that guy is just trying to sell you a beach house in Bloemfontein, maybe I can give you an alternative view on facts. You don't even have to believe me. Just give me a chance. Here are the facts that I think are relevant to this case. Make up your own mind.
Well, I think the perfect example of that is what's going on with the U.S. refugee program offer to Afrikaners, whatever the U.S. government decides. And that's the whole, when this thing started, well, yeah, it's not an Afrikaner. Well, it doesn't matter what you think an Afrikaner is. It doesn't matter what I think an Afrikaner is. It matters what the U.S. government defines as an Afrikaner suffering racial injustice. So that whole program, all the lies, you'll be living in FEMA tents. It's not real. Trump is just trying to, all this nonsense and people getting from Agri-SA.
The refugee program has been canceled.
Yeah, exactly. There's no program. It only opens up after 90 days. Just people making ludicrous assumptions based on no facts. It's just insane. Great edification for me is that everything I've said about the program that yet to exist, or everything I've said about refugee resettlement, has been factually proven. I mean, and I've been from the very beginning. That within 2 hours of when Trump announced it, I was already live streaming, telling people about the program. And since then, it's been nothing but a propaganda war from the government, from the media, from social media, from Agri-SA, from John Steenhuisen, from everybody under the sun, lying about what this is. And I'm not encouraging anybody to come to America. Don't come to my house. You go on my front lawn, you'll regret it. I've got rock salt in my 12 gauge, and I'll shoot you in the bum. Anyway, but the point here is that because I've told people the truth, my credibility is always strong, but now people are finally discovering it, and they're coming because they're hungry for the truth. They want it. But it's still, every night I get this, I can't come because I'm too old. It's a refugee program. It's not immigration, but I don't have any money. You don't pay. It's free. And now finally the embassy, after all this long, interminable wait, puts out a frequently asked question, which ironically is very similar to the 14 most frequently asked refugee resettlement questions that I produced 3 days after the program was announced on February 11th. Yeah, eerie that, strange.
Well, Chris, why don't you talk about the fact that AfriForum personally requested Donald Trump to cancel the refugee program? They handed a request to him by hand that he should eliminate this option from the table. I mean, that's...
Yeah, but see, I don't believe that because they only went on the tour. They didn't see Trump. Oh my goodness.
No, man, there's been a lot of fog of war and just absolute chaos information wise. That's why I like that term, an information war, because you as someone with military experience will see the resemblance of just not knowing what side is up or down in the chaos. And a lot of people then are looking for sources that will be able to give them, in Afrikaans we have this word ontnonsens, de-nonsense the situation. And therefore I'm just so glad that there is alternative media platforms that are able to do that. Not that those alternative media platforms should be believed blindly.
No.
There should be giving an alternative. That's the whole point. Underline alternative.
There's plenty of people in the alternative space that don't know their bottom from a hole in the ground. That's for sure. But the point here is that we're certainly not getting the truth from the mainstream media, from the legacy media. So it's incumbent on those who are in this space to do their best they can and be as objective as they can about the situation, because people need the truth. I mean, there are a lot of people in South Africa who don't even know about the refugee program. Again, I'm not trying to promote it. I don't want you coming here. I don't want you not coming here. I'm agnostic. It's not my position to tell you to come here or not come here. But, it is my position to be honest with you and evaluate and use my experience. I mean, for me, and the question of the refugee program, I'm in a unique space. I mean, how many people in this audience, did you ever worked in the American embassy? Have you ever worked in an embassy in Africa? Have you ever dealt with refugees? Have you ever dealt with war? Have you ever been a cop? I'm in a unique position, and so I'm familiar with it. So my credibility is important to me, and so I have no desire to mislead anybody, and I think a lot of people are realizing that. And so the problem is getting the exposure to get people to come over. And it's the same with what you do on your video. Your video is simply trying to lay things out the way they are. Yeah. And you've shown the receipts, and if people don't want to believe it, then they can have cognitive dissonance. Yeah. You can't help some people. That's just, they're just going to have to deal with reality, and, we'll see what happens. But, wow, I'll tell you what.
And you'll see when you watch the second half of the documentary, Chris, the documentary starts with the question, is Trump right about South Africa? And it ends with the question, is Trump right about South Africa? I ended by saying, right, now that you've heard these experts talk about the topics, now that we have presented these facts to you, you be the judge. You answer the question of the title of this documentary. That's the point. I'm not going to sit there and say, this is now the truth, and if you don't believe this truth, then you're just uninformed, and you should watch. You weren't paying attention, or you weren't listening properly. No, I'm just saying, well, here are the facts with all the sources for them, and that's what we set out to achieve. And I really do hope that is what we achieved. It does seem like that is what we achieved based on the feedback that we've been getting. I hope we get to 100,000 views soon. I'm very proud of the fact that the documentary has done so well based on the small team that was working on it under a very strong time crunch. But yeah, if people are, if you were unaware about that documentary, it's for free on AfriForum's YouTube channel. It's not behind a paywall. It will remain free forever, and you can share it as much as you want. You can make little clips out of it as you wish. our mission is to get the truth out there. We're not making any money from it, or like trying to give you a little bit like a taste of it and saying, well, to watch the rest of the documentary, you have to sign in here and give your bank details here. No, it's just there, and you can do with it whatever you want. You can literally create little clips out of it and play those clips, share those clips. I don't care. I just want the truth to get out there. As long as you don't manipulate the content to say something that it doesn't, then you can do what you want with it.
Well, unfortunately, the first casualty of war is always the truth, and this is an information war. And unfortunately for you and I, had it not been for Alex Jones, maybe we could have collaborated with our own channel called InfoWars. But Alex Jones beat us to the title InfoWars.
Such a great trademark. It's such a great brand.
It is. I mean, I wish and then of course you've got what's the one from Glenn Greenwald? He's got the signal or something like that, but he's got a great title for his thing too. So,
but you'd fit right in. I mean, InfoWars with Colonel Chris Wyatt. I mean, it's just a match made in heaven, that those two brands. But yeah, on a different timeline.
A different timeline, in a different universe. Anyway, but not the Marvel universe. Anyway, Ernst van Zyl, The Conscious Caracal. Thanks for sharing with us your recent documentary. Did Trump get it right? Yeah, Trump got it right. Whether he got it right or not, the people around him certainly got it right to get to Trump, and some good things have come out of it. People are looking at South Africa, and the blinders are off for many people. And people, I'm seeing Black American journalists and especially YouTubers going, "What the hell is going on in South Africa, man?" And they're shocked, and that was not the case before. The only other time I saw South Africans or Black Americans cover South Africa before is they'd watch video clips of the Springboks. Yo, man, check out this rugby, Now people are actually asking critical questions, unlike the handicapped Nigerian/British journalist who traveled to Orania, who feared for his life in Orania because he was Black. Anyway, so there you go. So InfoWars, that's what it's all about. Ernst, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it. I'll give you the floor. Anything you want to say about the video or about things in general, the situation in South Africa? I always give my guests the floor at the end. You know that. So it's your time to share what you like before we wrap up.
Well, Chris, I just want to use this opportunity for two things. On the one side, I just want to reiterate that rule of thumb again of don't just believe what AfriForum or what Chris Wyatt says, research what AfriForum and Chris Wyatt says. If me or Chris says something that just doesn't sound right to you, go check. I mean, we're not asking anyone to blindly just believe what we say. Go check it out. And if for some reason you go check out the source and you see, well, this is not right, AfriForum was spreading misinformation, bring it under our attention. We will correct it. I've always put that offer out there. If someone points out that we genuinely get the facts wrong on something and they point it out, we will correct it. We will admit, yes, we got this wrong. Hasn't happened to this point. It's now day 50, around day 50 or so since Trump's original post about South Africa on the 2nd of February. It's also day 50 of us waiting for someone to point out the misinformation that AfriForum has been allegedly spreading. So the last thing I just wanted to say is, again, thank you to everyone that has been standing by AfriForum and other organizations during the past 2 months. It's by far not just AfriForum and the Solidarity Movement fighting this fight alone. There are many individuals and organizations out there doing fantastic work. I mean, I wish I could go through the entire list, but just to name a few that come to mind, Politics Web, as I said, Martin van Staden and the Free Market Foundation, also Sakeliga, Chris Wyatt and other alternative media platforms. These are the types of people that when the temperature gets high, when it really counts, stuck to their guns and stuck to their principles, even if you get punishment instead of reward, as C.A. Langenhoven wrote in his poem about what it means to be a man with integrity. He is the man who says what is true, even and does what is right, and sticks to his conscience, even if he gets punishment instead of reward. And that's what we saw for the past 2 months. A lot of organizations and individuals backing away from the fight because the temperature got too hot, and a lot of individuals and organizations standing their ground and saying, even if the temperature gets very hot, even if we are targeted by the entirety of the ANC's propaganda machine, we know we're right, and therefore we're going to stand our ground. As Jan Rabie said, and I'll end on this quote, it's better to fight against the entire world than to fight against your own conscience. And I think that's what I want to end this conversation on.
That's a fantastic point, Ernst, and I appreciate that. Ironically, my first trip back to South Africa after the COVID scam was alleviated and we could travel internationally again. I spoke at the Reformation Society in Rondebosch, and they asked me what topic I want to speak on. And I said it seems an apropos time back there in August of 2022 to talk about doing what's right, moral, and just in the face of injustice. That's been my guidestone throughout my life, and it continues to be the case today. And that's why I don't back down, because I treat everyone equally, and I treat everyone fairly, and people are promoted based on merit and their effort they put in, not based on who they are or where they come from. So doing what's right, moral, and just in the face of injustice has been my guidestone, and it kind of tracks right along with what you just said there. People should always use that as the way you engage others. Anyway, Ernst van Zyl, the Conscious Caracal, always a pleasure. Good to see you again. We've been both so busy. This is the first time we've talked this year. Here it is, the end of March already.
Can you believe it?
Yeah, a quarter of the year is already gone, and it's the first time we chatted. All right, well, we'll chat again sometime soon, hopefully, if we get a little break in our schedule. All right, I'll let you drop off, and I'll wrap up. Thanks, Ernst.
Cheers, guys. Have a good one. And goodbye to your audience as well. Thank you very much for tuning in.
All right. Bye, Donkey. Tot ziens. All right, that's Ernst van Zyl, the Conscious Caracal, representing AfriForum, talking about the documentary that he recently did. I hope that you found that informative and interesting. The conversation, we went a number of different places beyond the documentary, but also covered the documentary. Appreciate it. Folks, you'll be automatically redirected to the news at the bottom of this hour. Early start for the news because it's Wednesday. And I've got Wednesdays with the Colonel. I'll be on with Ronaldo. And no doubt we'll be talking about Nota Boloy, I'm sure. For the Super Chats, let me just deal with those very quickly. There were a few of them. I like how YouTube has finally changed it so I can see all the Super Chats. We got Lucas Feldman became a member. Thank you. We got Marius Kruger became a member. Thank you. Quids became a member. Oh, you're already a member, Quids. That's an extension, but all right, you renewed it. Annalie Hussen became a member. Thank you. And then Marcel Nell says, legends in my books, both Ernst and Chris de Opresso Libre. Well, thank you so much for the super chat. Marcus Nell, that was your first super chat too, 70 Rand. Then Charmaine says, what is U.S. Army GDP? Because Ramaphosa won't be bullied. 35 Rand. I did mention the United States military's budget is $898 billion. South Africa's GDP is less than $400 billion. So the Army has a budget twice the size of the entire economy of South Africa. So put that in perspective. Charmaine, thank you for that super chat. And then Sean Nadia gave one for the next hit song, Persona Non Grata 2.0, 100 Rand. Thank you all so much for the super chats. I think that takes care of the super chats. And thanks for tuning in. Be sure to hit the like button if you haven't done it already, folks. It is helpful. It does help the algorithm. And hopefully I'll see many of you at the news at the bottom of the hour. Folks, stop arguing in the chat. I mean, honestly, I'm looking over here, and two people got a timeout earlier because they just misbehaving. And now we've got people misbehaving again. You're misunderstanding each other. Just let it go. There's nothing evil going on over there, okay? All right, thanks a lot, everybody. We'll catch you at the bottom of the hour for the news on Chris Wyatt Africa. Always a pleasure. Cheers.